You're listening to the RTI Press Pass powered by Rocky Top Insider.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast, quite possibly the last full episode for the year of 2025. Obviously, we will have a reaction episode coming to you after the Music City Bowl, but today is December 18th. We are just a week away from Christmas here recording on a Thursday. Plenty has happened in the world of Tennessee football since we last talked to you, but we will go ahead and bring in my good friends, your good friends, to talk about everything Tennessee football related here today. Ryan Shumpert is over in the top right corner if you're watching this on YouTube. And of course, Ryan Sylvia is in the house as well. Gentlemen, good morning. Happy Christmas season. Happy holiday season. How are you guys doing? Shump, we'll start with you.
Doing well. Yeah, glad to be back on here. And I feel like we had a very poorly timed podcast last week because the Jim Knowles news probably broke at least within 24 hours of us recording, and then we got pushed back due to some scheduling conflicts this week. So we feel like we're a little bit overdue to talk about some stuff, but tons of stuff gone down between Jim Knowles, the Legend Bay saga concludes. We finally know. We already knew Tennessee's opponents, but now we know the order and the complete schedule for last year. So a lot of football news in the last week that should be exciting to get to.
Yeah, no doubt. Sylvia, what about you? How are things going?
Doing good. Just counting down the days to the prestigious Music City Bowl. As Jeremiah Thielander said yesterday, big game. Big game coming up for the Vols.
Huge game. Huge game.
I think it's – I was going to spit this take last week, and you're going to have to bear with me here. So okay. I see this as a round 5 between Tennessee and Illinois. 5-round fight. Tennessee won game 1 in basketball. Tennessee won game 2 in basketball. Illinois won by keeping Luke Altmaier.
Okay.
Tennessee tried to poach Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier said, no, I'm staying. So now it's 2-1 Tennessee. And then it got to 2-2 in basketball. And so to me, this is kind of a true winner-take-all. But the take here is that if Tennessee wins, it's no longer a win that Illinois kept Luke Altmaier, because who cares? We still beat you with Luke Altmaier. We did better. We got Joey Aguilar. It's kind of I can't remember what golf podcaster had this take that Justin Thomas won his first major was the 2020 PGA. So it was with nobody in the stands. There's no fans there. And he goes, Justin Thomas doesn't have a major. He's a 0-time major winner until he wins one with fans. But once he wins that one, then he has 2. Then his 2021 PGA Championship counts. That's kind of how I feel. For
Okay.
Luke Altmaier choosing Illinois over Tennessee to count as a win for Illinois against Tennessee, Illinois then has to beat Tennessee in the Music City Bowl with Luke Altmaier.
So it could be a 4-1 sweep for Tennessee.
It's either going to be 4-1 Tennessee or 3-2 Illinois.
Okay.
With Tennessee having to wait 2 years until the basketball team goes up to Chicago to try to even the score.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I think it works. I think that's fine.
Here's a Music City Bowl take for you that I was workshopping a little bit at Lady Vols Media yesterday. So if you fast forward a couple years, we're likely going to have a 16-team playoff, right? I think that's going to happen eventually. The second round, then, I would assume would need more host sites. I think the first round would still be on home fields. And then the second round, you'd go and you do the Rose Bowl and you do those type of things like they do now. You need more sites. One of those sites would almost certainly be Nashville, which would be, if you're still calling them the different bowls, like how you're calling it the Rose Bowl, how you're calling it the Fiesta Bowl, even though it's part of the playoffs, it would naturally have to be the Music City Bowl in the playoffs, which would make this Tennessee Music City Bowl win in 5 to 6 years look so much better than it would the Music City Bowl that we know now.
Yeah, you can flaunt the 2025 potential Music Bowl champions.
Essentially,
you don't even need to say winners; you say champions.
That is an incredible come up for Music City Bowl, and
or they just keep the Music City Bowl as it is, and then they come up with a new name, if any name at all. But I think you just promote the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, no, probably. I mean, that's what happened with the Cotton Bowl and the Peach Bowl. No, those were bigger bowls than the Music City Bowl, but those were not BCS bowls, and they got the bump up. Like I was thinking about that when I wrote the Kiffin thing last year because Tennessee made the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl that year, and Tennessee went like 7-5. So being like Kiffin's lone team made the Peach Bowl now makes it sound like they were way better than they actually were.
It is funny when you go back and you look through the history of certain teams, and you do see a like you're saying, a Peach Bowl victory here, something there, and it does mean a little bit different as the landscape evolves. And not to get out of order or anything, and we are going to be starting off with the Jim Knowles hire here in a minute.
Let me throw one more
the day after.
Go ahead. Thing in there. The second bowl. Let's go to El Paso. The Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. Make the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl a college football playoff game.
I'm trying to think of like geographically where that other one would be. I feel like you can't stick like another one. Like you can. I don't think you can do like the Citrus Bowl. It needs to be in like a dome too. So let's go out west. Let's go Midwest. I'm down. Idaho.
Idaho potato.
There's no region over there that's being represented in the bowl games right now, or in the
Little Caesars up in Detroit.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Sure.
We'll see. I just think you got to promote the Music City Bowl. The big things are calling.
Got it. It's not even an option. Speaking of the Music City Bowl, though, a little bit of news came out yesterday that might impact Tennessee's path through the Music City Bowl, if you will. Jake Merklinger, a 2-year quarterback at Tennessee, he decides, or I guess reportedly, decides to enter the transfer portal. So he won't be with Tennessee coming up for that game in Nashville on the 30th. Going back a couple days, though, to Tuesday, Tennessee quarterback Joey Aguilar did meet with the media. He obviously spoke as though he plans on playing in the Music City Bowl. We don't really know what that'll look like, if it'll be a half, if it'll be a game, whatever it might be. But that obviously sets up one George McIntyre to potentially get a good amount of reps. And I think that's something that, did not necessarily come as a surprise to any of us, but I think that's certainly a guy that you want to see at least step on the field a little bit before you get to next year with the second straight quarterback battle that Tennessee is going to have. So a little bit of news in the, I guess, tangential to the Music City Bowl that came out on Tennessee side of things in the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, I think it's, just good from the standpoint of, if Merklinger was going to transfer, which we all thought he was, just to go ahead and get that out of the way and let McIntyre get more practice reps in bowl prep. And, again, I think Joey Aguilar will play that entire game. But if, God forbid, Joey Aguilar suffers an injury or something like that, it would. Then you're just in that awkward spot where Merklinger is to back up, but there's literally no gain to letting Merklinger play in that game. So it kind of takes away that awkward situation or, somewhat tough decision. Josh Heupel having to step on somebody's toes.
Yeah, I think it just cleared the way. I mean, I don't think any of us anticipate this either way being like a 35-point win for either side. But if it did get ugly one way or the other too, it just makes it cleaner to just insert George McIntyre and say, hey, go get these reps, go get this under your belt, rather than, dancing around, hey, do we skip Jake Merklinger, even though he's technically QB2 on the depth chart, but, don't think he's going to, it just makes it easier. And then I think that's a good point with you, Shumper, as well, where it's like, it's getting the QB2 reps at practice. He's splitting reps with just Joey Aguilar. And I guess Mason Phillips here and there as well. But for the most part, it's just Mose Phillips. For the most part, it's just those two guys, though. So it's probably good for the development as much as it can be until Faison gets to campus too. And then, now you can start to focus a little bit more on Faison, and that opens up stuff for him as well. So overall, it's just, he had a chance to win the quarterback battle this year. Felt like if he didn't win it, it was probably going to be, a time for him to look elsewhere. And I do think too, he could follow, the footsteps of a guy like Taven Jackson and be someone that probably could land at a Power 4 school and maybe play a little bit there. And then if he doesn't stick there, still an opportunity elsewhere at a, I don't think he's someone, I guess is what I'm getting. I don't think he's going to the FCS level or the Group of 5 level for a bad Group of 5 team or something like that. I think he could land somewhere that, is relatively respectable.
Yeah, I think he could. I don't know. It will be interesting.
If he
Whether
goes
it's
group
like
of 5, I don't think it's going to be like, man, a group of 5 team that's fighting for bowl eligibility. I think it'll be a group of 5 team
Good
that's
group
like,
of 5.
okay, they're theoretically in the mix for the group of 5 playoff spot. Like I think it'll be someone that has a chance to do something. I don't think it'll be like bottom of the barrel is what I'm saying.
maybe South Florida, maybe follow in the footsteps of Gas Pipe.
If Golish was still there, would make a little more sense.
It would
We'll
definitely
see
make
what
more sense.
Hartline wants to do.
It does seem like that I'm blanking on his name. It does seem like the South Florida quarterback from this past year is probably going to transfer, and Gas Pipe's out of eligibility, so they'll be looking for somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
They will need a new bull in town for that team. All right, so going back a week, we recorded the RTI Press Pass last Wednesday, and we talked about potential names that you would need to know for the Tennessee defensive coordinator search. Well, then you hit Thursday, one day later, and an explosion of news happened. We're going to talk about all of that here in a minute with both Jim Knowles and a little bit on Tim Banks and where he ended up in case you had missed that throughout the week. But first, just a couple of super quick housekeeping notes to get through this before we start our business. As always, you can find all of the Rocky Top Insider podcasts over wherever you get your favorite podcasts and on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel. That is the RTI Press Pass in the middle of the week. That is RTI Rim Runner, Tennessee basketball and SEC basketball podcast with Ryan Shumpert and Bob Baskerville there in the midweek. You have Pancakes and Bacon with VFL Kyler Kerbyson and Reed Bacon on Monday mornings. And then, of course, you have the RTI Lowdown with Chris Lowe and Bob Baskerville coming out on Sunday nights as those guys recap the latest news and notes and storylines around the college football world with a Tennessee tint as well. So be sure to check out all those things, and then be sure to also check out our great partners over at WATE. You can download the WATE 6 Plus Smart TV app on your TV app store. It's super easy to do. Great way to stay tuned with all the local coverage, whether it be East Tennessee news, East Tennessee sports, Tennessee sports, obviously, whatever it may be, you can go and check out there. All right, let's get into it. Let's rewind a week to last Thursday. First and foremost, I can't necessarily remember the order, but I think it was Tim Banks first. A report came out via Auburn on 3 that Tim Banks was heading to Auburn to reunite with Alex Golesh. The two were obviously Tennessee's respective offensive and defensive coordinators at Tennessee in 2021 and 2022 under Josh Heupel. So there's plenty of familiarity there. Tim Banks then, a couple days later, officially got announced as the Tigers' new safeties coach. So he returns to a familiar position. That's a position that he also held with Tennessee for those 5 years as he was the defensive coordinator as well. Auburn, a little bit turning into a who's who of Tennessee in the past. They've got Cody Burns as the associate head coach and wide receivers coach. They've obviously got Alex Golesh as the head coach. They've got Tim Banks as a safeties coach. And then as we wrote about previously, they brought on Larry Scott, I believe it was, to be the tight ends coach. If that's a name that rings a bell in your head, it certainly should from a previous Tennessee team. So that's a little bit of an interesting storyline.
The offense coordinator may be the best offense in program history in 2017. I don't know how anybody could forget about that. Just those guys could get up and down the field.
They could. I know.
And I say that I don't mean to rip Larry Scott. I don't. I don't think the OC was the biggest issue with that situation. That roster, besides John Kelly, was not the best. But a forgettable season. If you had forgotten that he was the offense coordinator, and then Parker Ball too, who was a walk-on at Tennessee.
That's right.
It's like a lower level staff. I don't know if it's like a GA or quality control assistant, but something like that. Assistant O-line. There we go.
So all of those guys will be making their returns to Neyland Stadium at the beginning of next year, at least close to the beginning of next year. I believe it's October 3rd. I believe it's Tennessee's second SEC game and 5th game overall. The Auburn Tigers take their new look team and new look offense into Neyland Stadium. A ton of returning faces. That will certainly be a fun one to cover. But after that Tim Banks news, we officially get the news that Jim Knowles is going to be hired as Tennessee's head coach. I believe a report might have come out the day.
Defense coordinator.
What did I say?
Head coach. You said Josh Heupel's out.
Coach. Not that. No. No. Josh Heupel not out. Josh Heupel made the hire. Thank you very much to bring in Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. I think we heard a little bit of word about that maybe in a report the day before or so. But Tennessee made it official pretty darn quick. Obviously comes over from Penn State. Had a couple of years spent at Ohio State where he was part of that 2024 national championship team. Josh Heupel knows how to plan against it at least. Obviously, those two teams met up in Columbus during the 2024 college football playoffs. Also spent some time with Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy. Also spent some time with Duke and David Cutcliffe. One of the things about Jim Knowles' defenses, and I'll let you guys dive into this a little bit more, but they have improved during their tenures. Obviously, some people have been fair, I think, to point out that it started a little bit slow, but I think that Jim Knowles, for the most part, has ended his places a lot better than he's found them, with the exception of Penn State. But at the same time, the Nittany Lions were just kind of a dumpster fire in all directions last year, so that one might have been a tough job overall. But Tennessee goes out there and makes a big splash with Jim Knowles. Ryan, what was kind of not only your first impression, but as you sit here now about a week later, as we've had the luxury to, what are your thoughts on this hire by Tennessee? And is it, a good one in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a good one for sure. Look, I think you could debate or make an argument that Ryan Walters would have been a better hire, or that's someone Tennessee you would have rather had if you're Tennessee. But I think of the people that were listed on hot boards or semi-realistic possibilities, I would say Knowles and Walters were the two guys at the top of that list, and certainly Knowles has as much pedigree as probably just about any defense coordinator in the country. So I like it. You mentioned it. His first years are traditionally his worst year everywhere he's been, and the only thing that goes against that is that at Duke in 2010 was his first year. They ranked 109th in points per game nationally, and then 2 years later in 2012 they ranked 110th. So very slightly off there. And look, that makes sense. Like, you would theoretically think that you'd get better as the tenure goes on. But as you're entering a first year and what's going to be an important year for Tennessee, I think it's fair to wonder about that. And I also just think it's like, what question I've had is like, if you're struggling in first years, that means your guys are starting to understand the defense better after a year or two, and growing from there. Well, it's your roster. I mean, it always changes year to year, but it's all the more dramatic that your roster changes year to year now. So I wonder if Jim Knowles will adjust some things, whether about his defense or about his teaching style, to try to make this a little bit more seamless. I'm sure he will. I guess how effective that will be to me is a question.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to what Heupel said, it was the first guy on their list, and you fired Tim Banks, and that was the first move you made, was to try to go get Jim Knowles. So you got your guy. Felt like, I mean, he was the biggest name, I guess, that was open on the market.
Yeah.
You could always go and poach a guy, but of free agents, essentially, after the Penn State coaching change, he was the biggest name, and so I think you have to be pretty excited about it. Everyone's asking for a little patience. I think you saw a few different guys just kind of across college football, reporters and analysts and stuff like that, just like, hey, this is a really good hire. You just got to let it take some time. I'm curious to see what that looks like next year, though, because if it's, hey, it takes some time, you're in the if you're looking at points per game, yards per game, you're kind of like sitting in the 50s and 40s. I think that can be like an okay, as long as the offense is still looking like it did this past year, that's manageable. Give you some time. If it's a significant step back even from what it was this year, which is kind of hard to imagine, but if it is, that's when it's like, man, I don't know how much patience, not, and this isn't a dig at Tennessee fans, just SEC fans and passionate fan bases in general, how much patience you'll actually get in that regard. But you'd have to assume that Heupel, who would make that decision, would have the patience to let things play out. And it is a group where Jeremiah Tillender talked to the media on Tuesday, and he's like, man, I can't wait to get that playbook. I can't wait to dive into that with Edwin Spillman. It is a group of guys that it's young, but that means that a lot of them do return. You're theoretically returning a Ty Redmond. You're theoretically returning a handful of pieces on the defensive line. So it is a bunch of guys that should, be able to pick that up for a full off season rather than, a bunch of new faces. There's going to be new faces, but maybe not as much as like you look across the country elsewhere. And it just seems like it's an entire different 11 on that side of the ball. Tennessee should have a decent amount of return. You got to find a safety, you got to find some defensive linemen. You're going to add some pieces elsewhere, but for the most part, it's a lot of returners.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about, Tennessee's defense was bad last year, so you hope Horseshoe is still a market improvement. I mean, he's been a defense coordinator the last 16 years, and his defenses have ranked in points per game worse than Tennessee's did this year, which Tennessee ranked 93rd in points per game this year. They've ranked worse than that 3 times. The 2 years I mentioned, 2010 and 2012 at Duke, and 2018 was his first year at Oklahoma State. They ranked 97th. So, you would hope that, like you said, of down first years in the 40s or 50s, and defense isn't perfect, but it's better, and you marry that with an offense that should be good again, and probably in the nation's top 10 in scoring. You got yourself a stew going.
Yeah, and I think that Shump made a good point a second ago. It's just kind of one of the big offseason talking points, and one of the big questions just going to be how quickly can you get things moving in the right direction? How quickly can you maybe expedite that process of, if it does take a little bit of time to settle in, how quickly can you get that to manifest the way that you want it to be? And obviously there's different routes that could be explored with that. And we don't know any kind of coaching staff changes that Jim Knowles is going to potentially make to this staff, but maybe he brings over people that are familiar with his own situation. Maybe it's attacking players, in the transfer portal who know a little bit more about what he's trying to do, can kind of be that on-field coach type of figure. But Silva, you mentioned what Jeremiah Thielander said about this. Look, we know that it's not going to be a drastically different defense heading into the Music City Bowl. Right now, that's where the team is focused. After that is done and over with, then it's going to be the install for Jim Knowles' defense. So you'll have kind of the pre-spring period when they start getting all those ready. You hit the field during spring. You've obviously got summer workouts, and then you've got the fall after that. So, you've got a couple of different kind of sessions, if you will, in the broader picture to get all those things down. I think that's going to be one of the big key questions is what does Tennessee do, and what does this staff do, and potentially pieces to the staff that we don't know yet to try to expedite some of those things. That's certainly going to be a big talking point.
I think the other thing of note too with it is he is, taking over the defense. And so he's got to get used to this new personnel. And that was something Thielander talked about too, where it feels like everyone's a freshman right now. Everyone's trying to make that first impression because he's just kind of sitting in the back, hands in the pocket, just assessing. It's William Inge as the interim DC for this bowl game, just to keep things, kind of continuous, give you your best chance of winning the bowl game before you kind of, hand the playbook to the guys out the door of the locker room after that game. But what is his assessment going to be on guys? We've seen a handful of guys enter the portal, but no one's been a shock yet of man, I can't believe that guy's gone or this like that. Curious to see as Jim Knowles sits back and assesses what he has and assesses what he wants to bring in. What do those conversations look like of, maybe Tim Banks and this old staff, maybe you got a passing grade from them. I don't really know if you fit in this defense. I don't really know if you fit the standard that we want to meet, and we want to go out in the portal and grab this guy or that guy, or we think someone that was behind you this season maybe gives us a better chance next season. I'm curious what those conversations look like, how that transfer portal situation shakes out. That just feels like another wrinkle into things when you add a coordinator to the mix rather than just a position coach, something like that. Like that's the guy who's, him and Heupel are hand in hand making the decision on the defense for personnel. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I like that's an aspect of the new transfer portal date. So it doesn't feel. I mean, don't get me wrong. You need to be tampering right now, and you need to be talking to guys, but you have a little bit more time to be patient and figure out what you do need. To me, the big question there, the way you just posed that, the player that's the big question to me is Idris Farouk. I think Tennessee's for sure going to go out and get one safety to be a starter. Farouk struggled for a lot of the season. He flashed, had some good games, certainly some really good plays, some really good moments late in the season. Does Knowles, does he go out and get does he want to get two guys that can start for him back there? Does he feel good about Farouk in one of those starting spots? Because if you're going to go in and get two starting caliber guys, I don't know, maybe Farouk would come back, but to me, it's hard to think that he wouldn't, enter the portal and try to find a starting spot elsewhere.
Because he could too. I think because he played his better football towards the end of the season as well. So I think if you want to completely overhaul the safety position and just say you got to get Miles better there, then sure, it might lead to a situation like that. And then if you're it's not like this was my only chance to start somewhere in the SEC. Like he could go somewhere else and play an impact. The other spots, I guess, like you look at and these are kind of givens, I guess, no matter who was the defensive coordinator. But when you do a defensive end, do you trust those young guys, or you go out and is he man, I got to land a big fish? At Leo, I think that's a little bit better with Jordan Ross and Caleb Herring, but what do you do there? And then you have to throw in the NIL negotiations. Now he's in the mix of, man, do we want to overpay to keep this guy here instead of going out? It just adds all those different types of wrinkles into it, especially with NIL too, where you're really managing a roster like you're paying guys salary. I mean, you see what USC is doing. They're literally signing contract extensions and posting it on their Twitter like it's an NFL team. That's just the way it is. So you add a defense coordinator, and now it's still Josh Heupel's team, and Josh Heupel, I guess, has the final say at the end of the day. But you would think you'd definitely value his defensive coordinator's, philosophy and view on things. So how much money does he want to put in this position, this and that, and while he's working hand in hand with Heupel, that'll be interesting to see maybe how that changes, because you kind of got the feeling with Tim Banks of which areas, I don't want to say overspend, but which areas were maybe a priority to, hey, you got to get really good here, and which areas you could kind of piece together. Is that going to change at all now that Jim Knowles is in town? I'm curious to see what they do in the portal there.
Yeah, Jim Knowles probably going to be sitting back there watching. I like this George McIntyre kid. Heard good things about Faison Brandon. We don't need to spend money on a quarterback. Give me that money for the defense. Give me that $3 to $4 million that it's going to take to get a good portal quarterback, and let me apply that to the defense.
We spread that around a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why, as we were saying, it's obviously it's a huge evaluation period right now for not only the coaching staff side of things, but also the player side of things. So, very eager to find out when those things start unraveling. Obviously, you would imagine that's after the Music City Bowl, and we start hearing a little bit about what Tennessee is going to do with both with both personnel and players. But even Ryan, you wrote about Tennessee's 5 biggest transfer portal needs yesterday, and I don't have it exactly verbatim. You put quarterback at number 1 because obviously you need to bring in some kind of quarterback, whether that's a bona fide starter, whether that's somebody who's just going to compete. I believe the next four spots were defensive. You got to imagine that if you're Jim Knowles, you understood coming into this situation that, there'd be a little bit of money to spend. If you found a player that you like, you might be able to go attack it. If you have a previous relationship with a player that you feel like could come in and be helpful and productive, then you can do that. It definitely feels like, and I think it would have regardless, but it definitely feels like Tennessee is going to, even if there's a big fish quarterback to whatever degree, defensive heavy there in the transfer portal once that thing starts getting rolling.
Yeah, I don't really see, I've heard people mention running back, and maybe you do go out of body there, but I don't feel like that's a huge necessity. Maybe depending on what some of the stuff shakes out on the offensive line, you kind of just try to add like a versatile guy that can be a swing guy and play multiple spots. But nothing on the offensive end feels like a huge need at all. So to me, it's all defense, and really, there's not really a spot that I look at and say there's just no need at all for anybody there. Like, I don't really think Tennessee needs linebackers, because I just think you bet on the young guys you have in that room, and the young guys you have coming in. But even there, if they did decide to go take a veteran linebacker, I wouldn't be like, I don't see the logic to this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Look, yeah, if you grab a Keenan Peely, sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I would agree. I don't think you need it. I agree too on the offensive side. It's like, offensive line, maybe you try to grab one. It's tough to grab an offensive lineman without being like, hey, you're a starter, and have it be a guy that you think can play at the best level. So, what they do on the offensive line next year, I think that's also probably going to be like because Lance Hurd's kind of the decision that changes everything there. Where if Lance Hurd stays, you're just running back the offensive line as it is right now, and just kind of going from there. If you're going If Lance Hurd is leaving, then that's when, all right, is Jesse Perry sliding back out to right tackle, and you're moving David over to left, and then you're trying to find a new guard. That's when things, I guess Sham Umarov would be inserted in after he played a lot this year. That's when things maybe mix up a little bit. I don't think you need a running back. I think you just bet on Deshaun Bishop, and you would theoretically retain a Peyton Lewis and DeJuan Morris, and then Justin Baker would probably slide in to be your 4 guy. If you want to add like kind of a lower tier transfer there, but I don't think that would be the most necessary thing. Tight end, I think you just bet on Ethan Davis and company. Wide receiver, I think you're probably just betting on Radarius Jackson, Travis Smith, and Tristan Keys, and you're like, surely one of those 3 guys can join in with Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley and make that trio work again. So it is pretty much on the defensive side, and it makes sense when you look at just the numbers from this year. The offense was really good, and the defense was not good at all, and so you need to overhaul there. What they really need to do, I think, is start building that depth up on the defensive line again. You were limited there this year, and now a lot of the guys at the top that you were limited with are moving on because they're out of eligibility. You're losing Josh Joseph. You're losing Bryson Easton, Dominic Bailey, Tyree West, Jackson Moy. You've got to replace a lot of those guys, and I don't think that can all be through hey, you're expecting Ethan Utley and Isaiah Campbell to be a factor. Sure. You also need to go out and you need to spend money. You need to get some big names on the interior of the defensive line, at defensive end, and really build that area back up, I think.
See, that's where I would say at defensive tackle, I don't necessarily feel like they need to get big names. Like, don't get me wrong.
I mean, you don't
Wouldn't
need
turn it down.
you don't need the biggest defensive tackle star for projected first round pick, but you need guys that I think have already played at a relatively high level. Like, I don't think that's a spot you can go and be like, hey, let's go grab this, G5 guy that was pretty good in Sun Belt. I think that's like, hey, let's go get this guy whose coach was fired, who's pretty good somewhere else.
What about like what Jackson Moy was before he got to Tennessee? Do you need to go get somebody that's better than that, or is that okay?
I think
I wouldn't have considered him like a big.
He played power 4 football. He wasn't a star, but you're like, okay, we can plug him in and play 30 snaps a game once he gets in 20 to 30 snaps a game once he gets to the swing of things, and you're like fine with that. Like, he's not going to take over a game, but you're not like, man, this is a liability up there. But I think you need multiple Jackson Moys if you're going to go that route.
Like two, I think.
You need to be able to rotate like at least 5 guys comfortably next year between the 2 DT spots.
And this might be a hot take. I think it's important too to note from that, you're not going to have Dominic Bailey to be kind of save your ass essentially, because you didn't have enough defensive tackles on the roster. But to that point, and this may be a hot take, I would be more inclined to get a big name at defensive end.
I agree.
Than I would defensive tackle. Like,
I just
agree. Marion Dye, I think, is going to be a good player. I think you can probably count on him to play some next year. Tyree Weathersby is certainly that. He's already done that. But, to me, he hasn't flashed a ton and looked like a high-level SEC defensive lineman. So, to me, that's the spot where it feels like you need to go get a 1.
I agree.
And then have those 2 guys play behind. Whereas defensive tackle, if you don't have to – you need like two backup type quality guys, and maybe one of those guys ends up being a starter besides David Hobbs. But if you do that, I would feel decent with having Hobbs back, having Nathan Robinson back, and then you're banking on Utley and Campbell both being good enough to play, and maybe hoping that one of those guys can become a legit starting caliber type player.
I agree. I think defensive ends it's just the defensive end room's not good enough right now, just with the departures. With Tyree West and Dominic Bailey, it was good enough. I didn't think that was one of the issues on the defensive side. You're losing both those guys. And so, I don't trust Tyree Weathersby to be a defensive end 1, which right now, if they started next season right now, he would be. Like, it would be him and Marion Dye playing all the snaps there. And I don't think that's good enough. So they're going to have to go add guys there. They're going to have to hope maybe a freshman can stand out a little bit there. And then the Leo spot seems pretty fine to me. Like, the expectation is Jordan Ross takes a significant step after this year. After his first year playing a lot of football, he's going into next year. Maybe he doesn't start over Caleb Herring just because of seniority, but he's probably going to play more snaps. But also Caleb Herring had a really good season this year too. So it feels like between those 2 guys, you feel pretty good. And then maybe you add a 3rd guy in the mix, whether it's a Christian Gass or a true freshman or someone like that can just kind of insert there to play a handful of snaps. But Leo, I'm not concerned about it. It's got to add a couple bodies on the interior of the defensive line. Then I think you add that if you're spending money somewhere besides, kind of the obvious, like you need another cornerback and things like that, like go get a really good, like, defensive end that can be a game wrecker.
I do wonder if Caleb Herring is a portal threat. I just feel like his numbers, he had 4 sacks. He was good as a pass rusher. I feel like his numbers were better than he was actually as a player. Like, I feel like he just wasn't very consistent, wasn't very good against the run, to where I could see someone coming in and someone who needs a good pass rusher coming in and offering him a lot of money in Tennessee not being willing to match.
That would be the situation, is if another, like SEC school was like, hey, here's a bag in Tennessee. He's like, we'll figure it out elsewhere. But if you're Tennessee,
you're not forcing them out by any means.
But it's also like you might be able to get away if the number's like just ridiculous, then you can't get away with it. But if it's somewhat comparable, like, hey, Byron Young, James Pierce Jr., and now Josh Josephs is probably a first 3-round draft pick. Like, go elsewhere. We're turning out NFL talent over here.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Shump, the other 2 defensive positions that you listed in your Tennessee's transfer portal biggest needs article over at RockyTopInsider.com, you put safety at number 2. We already talked about that a little bit with Idris Farouk. You mentioned, though, in a good point in this article, and I don't know if we exactly mentioned it, I had a little bit of technical difficulties there for a second if you're watching on YouTube. But the other one that you mentioned a second ago was with Jalen McMurray out, and obviously the Boo Carter situation that flamed out throughout the year, Tennessee's going to have to nearly replace every snap at star that they did last
William
season.
Wright's the only other guy that played there.
So
Marcus Murray was third string on the depth chart, technically.
and he's transferring too. So obviously Tennessee's going to need to figure out what they need to do with star as well. And then cornerback, obviously it's a place where, you know that Jermont McCoy's off to the NFL. You feel pretty confident that Colton Hood is going to be off to the NFL. He has not announced anything, but his stock is pretty darn high right now after what he did after this past season. I saw about a week ago or so, ESPN had him tagged as a first-round pick, number 30 overall to the Patriots, but still a first-round pick, maybe right there on the fringe. So you look at next year, you've got Ty Redmond, who was obviously the super freshman who played the entire season in replacement of Ricky Gibson. And then you would think that Ricky Gibson probably comes back, and we'll see what happens there. But behind that, it's not a lot of depth. Obviously, I think that's a place where, Tennessee could afford to try to get a good piece there. Again, bringing in Colton Hood, I think is something that saved the season in a lot of ways when they did, just because of the versatility that he had. I think he maybe was able to play a different position. Maybe you could have put him at star if you needed him to, but him being able to be brought in and, and be able to step into the kind of role that he did and be productive and successful at it was, an undeniably incredibly important part of Tennessee's season. So that, to me, is the only one that we really haven't talked about from your list that you put out yesterday.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily feel like Tennessee needs a starter, but behind Ty Redmond and Ricky Gibson, it's kind of like what do you have there? And it's really just Timothy Merritt and Trey Petit, who played 95 combined snaps as true freshmen. So, again, it's certainly possible one of those guys could take a nice step this offseason and be a good backup, but you're just really, really thin there. So it feels like you need another body at the very least. And again, I think that's where, Tennessee talks about the cross training. You need safeties. You need someone to play star. They just need a lot of defense backs in general, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about that and what the kind of the skill sets for the players they target are.
Speaking
it's
of,
a lot of talk about cross training.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll say it's a lot of talk about cross training, but we haven't really seen it much in the last year. So maybe that changes under Jim Knowles, but it just hasn't really been. It's a lot of talk in the offseason. Hey, this guy's doing this, he's doing that. And then Jalen McMurray plays every single snap this season at star, when it felt like he was a guy that maybe could have, hey, maybe you can fill in a little bit at cornerback and do things like that. But so we'll see. But I would agree. I mean, theoretically, you just want to grab like a handful of guys that just like, hey, just put them in the secondary and we'll figure it out.
See what they got.
Because there's going to be holes you need to fill throughout the season. I mean, you saw this year. Who would have thought when the last season ended that your tandem of Ricky Gibson and Jermont McCoy would play combined like 5 snaps before, it's just completely over for them. And you're going, Colton Hood's a true Devin Booker story where it's like he's going to be a potential first-round draft pick. He was never listed as a starter on the depth chart. Even to the last game, he was listed as cornerback 2 behind either Jermont or Ricky. I think he was behind Ricky technically on the depth chart. Obviously, he started every game, but it's still like, hey, he's a career backup at Tennessee on paper, and he's going to be a first or second round pick.
Yeah.
Ricky Gibson's up there with, I think it's 1A, 1B, and I don't know. It's one of the funnier Josh Heupel lies about an injured player, where it's just so clear that both of them were going to be out for the season, and he's like, we'll see. They could come back. Keenan Peely in 2023 wasn't full go by the start of spring practice. Spring practice started 2.5 months after the season ended, and he still is not cleared. And that's 2.5 months after the bowl game, 3.5 months after the regular season ended. And Josh Heupel was like, can't rule this guy out just yet. Up there with Cedric Tillman having tightrope surgery, which is like a 4 to 6 week recovery, and every week, like 2 weeks after the surgery, Heupel being like, we'll see. He's getting better. He could go this week.
He's progressing in the practice field. He's doing the right. His teammates he's really been supportive of his teammates.
The Tillman one also was before the SEC ability report took into effect. So he really could.
They'd ask him about it every week.
Yeah, and he could just sit up there and say whatever he wanted about it. It was not that it's still not the Wild West these days. It's a little bit, obviously pulled back as well. And you get less nowadays, but I forgot that one was before the availability report days. All right. Well, speaking of players who won't be at Tennessee next season, we have one to talk about. On Tuesday night, right before Tennessee hosted, who did they play? Louisville in the Food City
Louisville.
Center. Obviously, a massive win for the Volunteers and Rick Barnes and his team. The legend-based saga had come to a close. We had a little bit of speculation that it was nearing its final destination, at least on the Tennessee side of things, the day before. So I guess on Monday, and he really even going back to Sunday night, I think is when this first came out. Sam Spiegelman of Rivals was talking on one of their recruiting shows that they do on YouTube. It was basically saying that, hey, Legend Bay and his camp have requested their release from the letter of intent. A lot of the word around that situation was that Tennessee probably was going to grant it. And then we figured out the official news on Tuesday night. Man, just obviously it's over from the Tennessee side of things. Tennessee does go ahead and make that happen. That was in a report according to, I believe it was VolQuest there on Tuesday night. But just the end of a saga to one of the wildest situations in recruiting sagas and storylines that I think you could possibly ask for. A guy who committed to Tennessee over the summer, a guy who flipped his commitment to Ohio State in mid-November, flipped back to Tennessee on signing day, and eventually signed with the Vols. But then you heard immediate, and I mean immediate speculation that he wasn't happy with his decision. You started hearing the reports about his family being involved, and there obviously being a little bit of a rift there between where two sides wanted to go, between, I guess, maybe his mother and his brother, and then him wanting to go to Ohio State. He posts a cryptic post online and then quickly deletes it. You fast forward about a week or two later, and he's posting pictures of himself on his Instagram, just decked out, I guess. And I don't know if it's scarlet or red. In my opinion, red things are red. So just decked out in red gear. Obviously, the Ohio State logo on it as well. It was just very evident where he wanted to be. We did hear in the report from Spiegelman that Tennessee was having active conversations. They did want him to be a Vol. They did understand that they had his signing. But I think obviously it just got to a point where things were too complicated. Things were too convoluted. Maybe there was not enough confidence that even if you did get past this initial period, that the transfer portal wouldn't just be waiting there on January 2nd. So Tennessee goes ahead and cuts ties, grants him of his release. And one of the wildest recruiting sagas of the 2026 cycle officially comes to an end from the Tennessee perspective. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if he's officially signed with Ohio State yet, but I think that is the widespread expectation for the finale of this recruitment, if you will.
Yeah, I haven't seen it if he has, but
I think Hayes Fawcett posted either that he intends to or that he did. So like it is happening. It is signing with Ohio State. He tells me for Rivals. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean that sounds like it hasn't happened.
When was that, by the way?
Like right after it was announced. That was December 16th at 6:57 p.m. Yeah,
Gotcha.
It was pretty quick. I don't know if he's officially signed, but it's definitely happening.
Yeah, I guess there was a little bit of scuttlebutt that Texas or Texas A&M might try to play their way back in, but boy, I think that he wanted to be a Buckeye more than anything in the world, and he did not want to be a Tennessee Volunteer. Maybe he liked it. Obviously, at some point, it seemed like he liked it. His family liked it, but I think that he just specifically wanted to be a Buckeye, go play for Ryan Day and that staff. And now it looks like he's going to be
Johnson. It's a Meechie Johnson move.
Here's a line from a former boss of mine when I was working at an apartment doing not construction, like renovations, like helping with the turn, because it was at an apartment on campus at UT, and so it was move out season.
Where does this story come from? Say that again. Where does this story come from? That didn't make sense in my head.
I worked at an apartment complex when I was a student at UT, and it was during turn, so it was when one wave of students is moving out and the next is about to move in. So you got to, it's just like all day work, like plastering walls and filling the nail holes and stuff. And he was like, "Oh man, we might need you guys to stay a couple hour or two. We'll pay extra." And I wanted to go home. Oh man, he's like, "You can go home. We need volunteers, not hostages." That's the legend-based situation right now. We need volunteers, people that want to be at Tennessee. We don't need hostages. So
that's
it made all the sense in the world to just, if he doesn't want to be at Tennessee, he doesn't want to be at Tennessee. It's whatever. Yeah. Is he a dynamic player? Sure. Could he have been a very interesting player to use in Tennessee's offense and do different things, maybe a punt return, things like that? Sure. he doesn't want to be here.
Would
You're
he have
talking-
probably left? Quite possibly.
Tap your kip, maybe see you in the portal in a couple of years. Who knows?
That's so much funnier as a quote. For the person we're running an apartment complex. It's so much funnier than thinking about it in the college football context. It makes way
He
more
said-
sense in this context than it does in that
He
context.
said no one is bigger than the power T when he was telling me to come back to work.
No one is bigger than the power of the standard. No one's bigger than 303 flats.
It was I'll tell it was the 10 student living.
No one's bigger than the power of 10.
Great boss, great guy. Very much enjoyed it, but that line made me laugh a little bit.
Wild line. That has clearly stuck with you too.
I thought it was very funny. I stayed.
It's
It got me.
in this-
I said, I'll stay.
I'm not a hostage.
In the same vein, I saw Will Wade drop a quote last night that was like, let's see, I just need to find the exact thing because it had me cracking up. We have a 3.0 GPA. That's wonderful. If we were running a daycare, if we were a competitive basketball program, we need to be tougher. We got a lot of casual personalities on our team. A lot of guys are worried about their grades, being good students. It's not what this is about.
No, you didn't come here to play school.
Nope.
Contextualizing there. Ryan, what
Schedule?
did Sylvia, did that do anything to the recruiting rankings? I know you took a look at everything for the most part when that happened.
On 247, I know for sure they dropped from number 4 to number 5. I think Notre Dame was the one that jumped them. On Rivals' own rankings, they're at number 10 now. I think Rivals Industry was at 7 or 8, and then 247 Composites at like 5, 6, or 7 right now. So it may be like one spot back, but nothing crazy on any of them. It's still as high as a top 5 class, as low as a top 10 class. Still the best sign class Heupel had at UT. So yes, but not much.
And
I am curious.
If you want to direct any anger about how low Rivals is on Tennessee, Eric Kane at Kaner on X, and also Grant Ramey at Grant Ramey. Those are the two guys. They're in charge of those rankings.
I can get their phone number if you want, and we can direct.
Read the phone number on air.
Some direct calls and texts.
Those guys, they're out to get Tennessee. They're out to get Tennessee recruiting.
A guy commits,
that's kind of the situation.
They call Shannon Terry. They say, "Hey, I don't know if you saw, but Faison Brandon just committed to Tennessee. That guy's not a 5-star anymore." Tristan Keys, LSU 5-star. Tristan Keys, Tennessee. I don't know if he's a top 50 recruit.
Drop him.
Tristan Keys, Nike. Tristan Keys, Adidas. Thumbs down.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Gotta get out.
It's not gonna be as fast as Adidas.
I'm curious if we named the title of this episode, "We Need Volunteers, Not Hostages," if that would do better or worse for our numbers. I do think we would have to change the name that we send over to our good friends over at WATE. Just don't know if that really fits their brand. But as far as our thing goes, I think we technically could put it up on YouTube. We need volunteers, not hostages. I just don't know if that would do better or worse. Part of me thinks it could do better. Part of me thinks that there's some intrigue there. But I don't know. Maybe we have some fun with it. Speaking of having a little bit of fun, we get to go to a couple of fun places next year, a couple of places that we haven't been to already. I'm trying to find the schedule. There it is. Let's see. Tennessee's inaugural 9-game SEC schedule was released last Thursday, so exactly a week ago. We already knew that Tennessee would start the season against their 3 non-conference opponents, and then it gets into a gauntlet and a landslide of SEC competition. Furman comes to Knoxville to start the season. Tennessee then goes to Georgia Tech and Atlanta in week 2. And then the Vols come back with one more game against Kennesaw State before starting everything off. A couple of quick notes about the schedule is that Tennessee will have 5 SEC games in a row before their open date, which comes on Halloween night, which understandably, a lot of people very upset that Tennessee's not playing on Halloween night, because if you have dark mode jerseys, even if you're a hater of the dark mode jerseys, or maybe at least a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm thinking of one person in particular, who doesn't necessarily hate them. They don't necessarily love them either. What's the word?
They're lukewarm on them.
I guess. I I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but even if you're a little bit lukewarm on them, you understand that Halloween night would be the night to wear them. But Tennessee is going to be off on that date. And then you finish the season with 4 straight games to close things out. LSU returns to, well, I guess I should say Lane Kiffin returns to Knoxville. LSU going to do that in the penultimate game of the season. A couple other notable things. SEC opener is going to be against Texas in Knoxville. First time those two teams have squared off in more than 50 years, only the 4th all-time meeting between the Longhorns and the Volunteers. And we know that the Manning bloodline will return to the field of Neyland Stadium. Arch Manning is set to return to the Longhorns in 2026. 1 week later, we mentioned at the top of the show, but you've got Auburn and the bevy of former Tennessee coaches returning to Neyland Stadium. Then Tennessee's got a return trip to South Carolina. Tennessee's got a trip to Texas A&M, which I believe is the first one since maybe 2016. Because I think I was a sophomore in college for that one. I believe that was the double overtime game. By the way, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but the overarching element stays true. I think it's 1-11. Texas A&M's all-time record with College game day in the house. They're one. It might not be 11, but it's around there. They only have 1 win with College game day in the house, and it was 2016 against Tennessee. So a lot of interesting things on Tennessee's schedule. Ryan, you wrote the takeaways article last Friday. What were some of the things that stood out to you the most about what Tennessee's 2026 slate will look like?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty manageable start to the season. I think that's one of the big things that stands out. You get the 3 non-conference games, and then you get your first 2 SEC games at home. And Texas obviously going to be a hard game. I think Auburn at home will probably be harder than people think. And then even after that, you have probably your easiest road trip, I would argue, against Arkansas. So it's manageable. I think for Tennessee to feel good about making the playoffs, and look, it's going to be a new beast again with the 9-game schedule. You would think more 9-3 teams will have a chance to get in, but I think Tennessee, you look at it, I think they have a good chance, maybe not a great chance, but a good chance to be 6-0 when Alabama rolls in. And I think you need to be that, or at the very least 5-1. And then the other thing, the schedule, where I think they got a really bad break is South Carolina. I view that South Carolina game as such a huge swing game because we'll see what they look like. And certainly I think the Kendall Briles hire was a good one. I think getting Lenora Sellers back is huge. So those 2 things alone make the game look harder, but I think it's all the more harder for Tennessee now. It's going to be their 8th straight game before the 1 week before their open date. You're coming off of Alabama, which is either going to be an emotional rivalry win or could be a pretty deflating loss. And then South Carolina, on the other hand, has an open date the week before. So I think that's a pretty bad break for where Tennessee got them in the schedule. And then on the reverse, Tennessee gets their easiest game of SEC play, Kentucky at home, the week after its bye. So I don't think the bye is, and we'll see. Injuries can always change that, and we'll see what it looks like in the season. But just from a 5,000-foot lens, I don't think that was the best of breaks for Tennessee on when their bye is.
Yeah, it's just tough to project, how well this team's going to start and things like that when we don't know who's going to play quarterback. Maybe I still don't expect this to happen, but maybe it's Joey Aguilar. Maybe he wins this case and he's got eligibility. Then okay, well, now you're rolling over a quarterback from last year, and we'll really see is there a year 2 Heupel effect? We've only seen one quarterback have a year 2 under Heupel where he's actually been like the guy, and he was phenomenal in Hendon Hooker in 2022. So, maybe it's a year 2 Heupel boost and his turnovers go down, things like that. I don't expect that to be the case. Maybe you get a big-time quarterback out of the portal, and it's a Brendan Sorsby or something like that. Okay, well, you can convince me they're going to start Hart. All right, well, if they go to the portal and they don't land a big fish, but they still land a guy, see what that is. Do you go to George McIntyre, Faison Brown? Because I think that dramatically lowers your ceiling for the immediate future. Maybe long-term it could work out, but as far as next season, that's probably not as good as getting a guy who's played a bunch of football elsewhere. It's just tough to look at the schedule like, yeah, that's a win, that's a loss, when right now it's just like God knows who's playing quarterback for Tennessee football next season. But at the same time, it's fun to look at. It's fun to get excited for some of the home games and think about, the UT versus UT matchup. And then from a media perspective, you'd have to think, especially from a fan's perspective, maybe every perspective except for head coach, or like, man, this 9-game SEC schedule is going to be awesome. It's going to be so many. There was nothing worse than a deflating loss to Oklahoma, a bye week, and then New Mexico State. I mean, there was nobody that just wanted to be in that stadium that day.
Right.
That was that just is not good for the sport. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now you get a premier program in Furman out of the way. You
Yep.
play Georgia Tech, who pretty good. We'll see what their quarterback situation looks like too. I don't think they'll be as good as they were this year, but still a team you definitely have to wake up for on the road. And then you get Kennesaw State, who that you got the storylines of Jerry Mack coming back to Knoxville, and they just won a CUSA championship, so they're certainly not a pulseless team or something like that. And then it's 9 SEC games. Like that'll be so much better from fan perspective, from just people interested in the sport perspective, where you're not sitting there in November and you're like, man, I can't wait for this. Tennessee needs to get back on the horse. It needs to really get a nice win under them, get fired up again. All right, wait almost a full month until they play Florida, because now you got a bye week and then a bye game. It just gets to a lull every single season somewhere. It doesn't feel like there's going to be much of a lull this year.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
And not that you expect it to make a huge difference either way, but I feel like Kennesaw State, if they look like they did this year, it'll be a lot better than what Tennessee has played in those games the last couple of years too. So again, it's not that you expect that game to be competitive all of a sudden, but it feels like you can maybe learn a little bit more or draw a few more takeaways from that type of game, where it just hasn't felt that way at all.
You don't expect Tennessee to go up 28-0 in 5 minutes like they have on some of these teams in the past. Like you expect a comfortable win, but maybe you have to earn it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Kennesaw State, is that Jerry Mack?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So a quarter of Tennessee's schedule is playing former coaches with Lane Kiffin, Alex Golesh, and Jerry Mack, right? So that's 3 out of the 12 games. And
Shane
you
Beamer.
just looked at
Yeah.
If we're counting position coaches, you got to count Shane Beamer.
You got GA.
VFL.
All right. So 4.
That's a third.
Totally forgot about VFL. 4 out of Tennessee's 12 games against a head coach. One of those being a little bit less prominent than the others. But then you just look at Tennessee's schedule as a whole. Georgia Tech, new offensive coordinator. Auburn, new coaching staff entirely. Arkansas, new coaching staff. South Carolina, new offensive coordinator. Kentucky, new coaching staff. LSU, new coaching staff. I mean, there's a ton of turnover that Tennessee is going to be facing in this schedule this year. Sylvia, you talked a minute ago just how difficult it is sort of project that far out from Tennessee's perspective. Well, in some of these cases, you don't know what in the heck they're going to look like, right? What is Kendall Briles actually going to do for Lenore Sellers and that Gamecock offense? How quickly can Alex Golesh and company get things going in Auburn? Is it fortunate for Tennessee that they have Auburn in just the 5th game of the year, rather than maybe later in November, when you do give that staff and that roster a little bit more time to, get their offense up and running? And then obviously, selfishly, very selfishly, but you really hope that Tennessee's in a great position by the time that LSU game rolls around, because, a deflated kind of, hey, we're not making the playoffs Tennessee team is going to be a little bit less fun hosting Lane Kiffin than, hey, maybe LSU's pretty good. Maybe Tennessee's pretty good. Maybe this is a really key game in the week. Maybe it's a college game day type of game. That LSU game, coming to Tennessee is one that I really hope, there's a lot of kind of fireworks around, and both teams are good, and both teams obviously need a win in that moment. So I think there's just tons of coaching news and notes for this schedule that, just makes it not just super intriguing, but obviously makes it nearly impossible to predict from where we are right now.
Yeah, no doubt. It's, projections at this point are very, very difficult. Always would be, but certainly with the coaching changes, with the portal movement, none of that having really happened yet, or at least nothing settled. It makes it a lot more difficult to project.
I mean, you look at it like this: there were 0 coaching changes in the SEC last year. Every single head coach from 2024 was back in 2025. And just college football fans and media as a collective, were unbelievably wrong on what the conference shaped out to be. LSU was awful. Their coach got fired. Texas A&M was undefeated for the majority of the season. I think a lot of people were high on Alabama and Georgia, who ended up playing the conference championship. But there's just a lot up and down the board that people were very wrong about. Now you're throwing in 5 new coaches, some number around there. Could be a lot of difference in just the way teams look on like Kentucky not having Mark Stoops as their head coach is going to be bizarre. And so
Yeah.
it is just going to be a weird shakeup from the coaching perspective. But then I was talking about too, like half of these teams are going to have new quarterbacks that aren't on the roster right now. Talk to me in a month and a half, and maybe I'll have a little bit better of a guess on what any of these teams will look like, but especially Tennessee, considering their quarterback, I don't say dilemma, but opening, I guess.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It is hard to sit through, but as you said a second ago, it's fun to be able to look at and fun to kind of be able to go ahead and project. We get a trip to College Station next year. I don't know if you guys have been there, but that's certainly an interesting place, a bucket list type place to go to. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting place.
All right. Anything else that we have
Different.
Different.
Yeah. Anything else that we have to get to now that we cross the 1 hour mark here on the show?
No, I just think we learned that you don't respect Beamer ball, and that's about it. You said definitively VFL Shane Beamer, who has a degree from the University of Tennessee, is the least important VFL out of all the former coaches we talked about.
Less important than Lane Kiffin, who
spent 1 year
his
here,
back.
less than 12 months here.
There are countless people who have absolutely no idea that Shane Beamer not only spent time here, but
Lane Kiffin doesn't have a degree from Tennessee. Jerry Mack doesn't have a degree from Tennessee. Shane Beamer has a degree from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
On his wall in his office.
Yeah.
Proud alum.
He says some of the best years of his life.
At least we got to the fact that Larry Scott is making his triumphant return to Neyland Stadium as well. I think that was an important thing that we did not miss today.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that besides that, I guess, besides the stray shot at me at the end? Anything else?
It was a very direct, honed in, scoped in.
I have you in my sights. You're in my sights.
Yeah.
I didn't miss the target.
I was in the sights, but that doesn't. It was uncalled for.
It was like that. That doesn't mean it's a stray. A stray is if I was saying something at Shumpert and then I threw you in the mix. This was a very
stray is that we had moved past the coaching conversation and you looped back to it.
Because I felt Shane Beamer was disrespected. One of the premier coaches in the conference.
That's okay. We can live. We can live.
Someone didn't watch the Netflix documentary of him throwing a football with his son standing on the fence in his front yard.
Who's not staying at all.
He does that all the time. It's not because the camera's there. Him and his son just stand on the fence and throw the football 24/7.
All I know is that he's going to be in the playoffs next year, and he better give a shout out to where he graduated college to get him to where he wanted to be. And then we'll see. Then we'll see if he's a true VFL. If he can, swallow his pride and do that.
He's not only going to do that, he's going to shout out Rocky Top Insiders Ryan Sylvia and Ryan Shumpert, who have respect for my alma mater and my tenure at my alma mater, but not that Butler clown.
He was a graduate assistant at Georgia Tech and then at Tennessee. He might be at the game at Georgia Tech.
He might be in the Bob Dodd.
Yeah. It's going to be like Steve Spurrier going to a Florida South Carolina game. That's going to be Shane Beamer at Tennessee Georgia.
He's going to have a split jersey. He didn't play, so it would be a split coaching
golf shirt.
Polo. A split polo. One collar one side, one collar the other side.
That'd be great.
There you go. That is Ryan Shumpert. You can follow him at rshump00. That is Ryan Sylvia. You can follow him at Ryan T. Sylvia. Otherwise, be sure to check out the entire Rocky Top Insider network of podcasts. We've got the RTI Press Pass and the RTI Rim Runner in the middle of the week. We've got Pancakes and Bacon on Monday mornings. And of course, we have the RTI Lowdown on Sunday nights with Chris Lowe and Bob Baskerville. Otherwise, be sure to follow Rocky Top Insider on all social media channels. That is at Rocky Top Insider on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. You can find us at all those locations. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow, make sure you do whatever you need to do to follow us where you are to get your Tennessee news. Make sure to also check out our good friends over at WATE. We love our partnership with them. We also love the WATE 6 Plus Smart TV app. You can go ahead and download it on your app store on your smart TV. Super easy to get, super easy to use, super easy to navigate, and a great way to not only stay tuned to a lot of Tennessee sports coverage, but a lot of local coverage here in East Tennessee and the surrounding areas. I don't think I'm missing anything else. Did I?
I don't think
How
so.
about this? And because we're going to see him on Friday for the first time in a long time, we'll give a shout out to our own Jack Foster. You can follow him at Jack Foster Media. That all being said, though, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. By the way, in case you're watching this on Thursday or whenever it does come out, in case you want to go back and hear what Josh Heupel had to say about Jim Knowles' press conference, go ahead and check out the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account. We will have the Josh Heupel press conference from Thursday, and then whatever players Tennessee gives us as well. So make sure you are subscribing to that to find out all the latest Tennessee football news heading into the bowl season. Otherwise, hey, thank you very much. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. We will see you back for the Music City Bowl in just less than 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.